Welcome. I grew up in a small Orthodox shul where my father was the rabbi. They began services by saying very simply, Zol Zayin Shah. Some of you need a translation, I can see, but not all of you. On behalf of the honorees this evening, I want to welcome all of you. And I feel entitled to say that on my behalf, I welcome all of you here. This is a marvelous occasion. I couldn't have imagined that when this hall was called Stamford Chapel, that we would have an occasion of this nature. My perspective on it, this is the fulfillment of a classical Jewish method of study, and it's called the Chavruta. Chavruta is a form of the word chaver that was made famous when President Clinton referred to Yitzhak Rabin as his chaver. Generally, chaver is translated as friend. I would translate it as partner. Two people who share the same goals in life. Two people who work together in order to better understand a Jewish text. Classically, in the yeshiva, there were no professors. There was a Rosh Yeshiva, but primarily the method of study was that two people got together and helped each other master the text. Well, Rabbi Posen did a remarkable thing. She advertised for a chaver. She announced that she would be willing to study, I guess in English we would say chaver is one-on-one. I'd be willing to study one-on-one with anyone who wants to commit themselves. Lois Shenker responded immediately, not with the purpose of writing a book together. I don't think it entered their mind when they first met. But their purpose was to study. And they did. When I heard about that chavruta, you know what it reminded me of? George and Ira Gershwin. In that case, they were brothers. But they sat down together and created together. I can think of Rodgers and Hammerstein. Any number of such duos, two individuals find that they share a common goal in life and want to help each other to achieve that goal. It's a wonderful thing. I know my son in Jerusalem, for the last 20 years at least, has a chaver who comes to his house 5 o'clock every morning to study Talmud. That is really Torah Lishma. There's no audience. There's no public announcement of anything, but two people studying a text. They did that. But what they finally came to do was something far more remarkable. It's very rare that a chavruta not only study a text together, but create a text together. That is creativity on an extraordinary level. And they achieved it. And we are the very fortunate beneficiaries of their efforts and of their learning. I told Lois just last night, what I was impressed with most of all in this book are the empty pages. I don't mean that in any sense as a critique of the pages that were filled with their words. They were lovely. But the empty pages conveyed to me a message that they had to all of us. And that message was, you have to fill those empty pages. You have to share with whoever reads it your thoughts and your feelings. There's no doubt in my mind that whoever does this will find the book a treasure far more valuable than whatever they paid to buy the book. Their children and their grandchildren will be inspired by every word that they wrote. So we're celebrating tonight not only the launching of Pirkei Imahot, but in my mind, we're launching books that will continue to be written by readers for generations to come. So Mazel Tov, and thank you for all that you have done.
I feel a little bit like a bride on her wedding day. I'm like simultaneously excited and also very shy and overwhelmed by all of the people here. It's very exciting. Never go to bed angry or upset. Always say, I love you. These are words that my mother told me as I was getting ready to marry Duncan. They're words of wisdom that are my guiding principles until today. I bet you have those words too. I see you thinking about them. Words that were given to you by a mother or a grandmother, handed down from an aunt, a teacher. Words that guide you. You live by them. Pirkei Imahot, commonly translated as Ethics of Our Fathers, is a 2nd, 3rd century set of Mishnah. It's from the Mishnah, book of law, but it's really wisdom of men that were meant to be guiding principles for the Jewish people. And they handed them down from generation to generation. They got put into a book. There are 6 chapters, and they're just words to live by. Don't separate yourself from the community. But they also have words in them like more women, more witchcraft. Right? It's a problem. They have words like, don't engage in idle chatter with your wife. I don't know. I like our idle chatter, Duncan. It works for me. Right? It was written by men for largely a male audience, and it didn't always jive with me. So why does it matter? Come learn with me, I shared with this congregation when I first got here. I was new in town. My job was largely based in education, and I knew that to get them to keep me, I needed to start learning with people. So I put it out there, and I coined it Rabbi a la carte, and I said, learn with me. Whatever you want to learn, wherever you want to learn, whoever you want to learn with, I'm ready to learn with you. So 9 months into that, I get a phone call from Lois Shenker. Lois was recovering from some knee surgery at the time and looking for something to pass the days with. So she calls me and she says, I want to learn with you. I said, great, what do you want to learn? She goes, I don't know, you choose. I said, that's great. I really love Parshat HaShavua, the weekly Torah portion. I was really looking for some new inspiration. And I said that, and Lois, no, it's not what I want. It's like, all right. So I did a little bit of research. I didn't want to be wrong twice. And I learned that Lois is someone who loves a project. I didn't know what that meant at the time. And so somebody along the way had suggested to me that, like, why is there Pirkei Avot but no Pirkei Imahot? And it was, like, in my head. So she came to my office, and we sat down together, and she says, all right, what do you want to learn? I said, well, what if we learned Pirkei Avot, wisdom of the fathers? And it piqued her interest. And I said, but let's not just learn that. What if we learned it and then wrote our own book, Pirkei Imahot, wisdom of mothers? And that piqued her interest a little bit. And that was the end of it. Because I learned that you don't recommend a project to Lois Shenker without your world being turned upside down and completely change. And so for 18 months, we sat together every other Wednesday morning at 10:30. And we learned the text of Pirkei Avot. We reflected with each other. What was brilliant was today is Lois's 80th birthday. Happy birthday. Tomorrow I will be 34 3/4. Where's my applause? That's a big accomplishment too. Thank you, thank you. And we come, so obviously there's an age difference there, but as we learned together, we learned that we learned from each other. It didn't matter that we had this age difference. It didn't matter that we had different points of view. What mattered was that we were really learning from each other and with each other. And so over 18 months, we learned together. We reflected on this wisdom, on this guide to living, and we found that we had a lot more in common than we might have expected, and that also we wanted to invite other women into the conversation. And so from that, Pirkei Imahot was born. Pirkei Avot begins, Moses received Torah from God at Sinai. He transmitted it to Joshua, Joshua to the elders to the prophets to the members of the great assembly. But what if it also read, Miriam received the tradition from God at Sinai. She transmitted it to Deborah, Deborah to her daughters to their daughters, and so on. Because we believe that just as Moses was standing at the mountain and the elders of the great assembly were standing there too, the women were there too. The women had wisdom to pass on from one another and is equally valid and important. And from there we pass on our wisdom from one to the next. And so our book, Pirkei Imahot, the wisdom of mothers, the voices of women, is just that. It's women adding their voice to this conversation of centuries and really being preserved in the great canon of Jewish wisdom that we pass on from generation to generation. And this wisdom would not have been put into such beautiful form without a number of people. We're taught, give credit where credit is due. Do not separate yourself from the community. And this project is certainly a gift and a product of our community. So I wrote down what I wanted to say because, you leave someone out, you'll never live it down. So I'm going to try not to leave anybody out. Lois, I have to. In my time with Lois, I learned so much more than you will see on the pages of this book. I see as a rabbi every opportunity I have to sit down with someone as a moment to learn from them and their experience. And Lois did not disappoint. Lois, while I'm over the moon thrilled that we have created this masterpiece together, I am most grateful to you for your wisdom and guidance. As a newish mom and a newish rabbi, you have been my sounding board and my confidant. Our every other week sessions are something that I look forward to because I always walk away feeling like I've been renewed and grounded and confident and ready for whatever I'm going to take on in the next 2 weeks. Thank you. Thank you for being my partner, for loving my children, for baking cookies, for bringing me food, for everything that you do. And Arden, thank you for lending her to me, for driving her occasionally, for letting her have the car more often than not, and for the stroke of brilliance you allow her to have at those 2 early in the morning emails I receive. Luckily, we're both awake. We have 2 Jennifers in our life, Jennifer McGrath and Jen Knutson, and Mary Dawn Decker. who are our publicity team. Jennifer McGrath edited our book. It's very rare that I write something that isn't edited by Duncan. And this time I didn't let him see it. I let Jennifer McGrath look at it first. She edited everything that we put out there. She helped us make this into, she thought of everything. Every comma, every punctuation point, even when I was wrong on my punctuation. She got it all. She made this into a reality. And Jen Knudsen and Mary Dawn Decker just put this into the world in ways that I could never have even imagined happening. And so I want to make sure that we thank them for taking this little study project into a major book. Now I have to thank our community. I think I got everybody. Rabbi Kosak, Cantor B, Fred, Mel, Debbie Blaney Allen, Leah Conley, Daniela Meltzer, Karen Wilkins, Joanne Vizotis, Brian Rohr, Marg Dar, Lilac, Haya Goldhammer, Rabbi Isaac, Rabbi Stanford, Dion, Kurt, Patricia, I think that's everyone, who pretty much works with me on a daily basis, and really everybody who works professionally in this building, and the lay leadership, especially of Neveh Shalom. It's very rare that a rabbi gets to say, come learn with me, and then they get to learn one-on-one with congregants. It's amazing that I've been allowed this space to learn with our congregation. Not everybody gets to write a book. I'm just gonna put that out there. Don't come to me thinking we're writing a book next. It's a lot of work. I need a little break here. But it's amazing that I've been able to save this space in my calendar, 10:30 every other Wednesday for an hour. Everybody knows that's my Lois time. And they have saved that space. Not only that, they have supported the idea. They have dealt with my craziness. They set up our fund. They answer the phone. They come tonight to help us sell books. They receive the shipments of crazy amounts of books. They deal with the chaos. They are certainly my community and our team, and I am so grateful to, they're all over the room. I can't look everyone in the eye, but I am so grateful to everybody who works here. Our foundation school teachers, they're here too. It just warms my heart that the teachers who teach my children also learn from me. It's amazing. To our federation, I see Mark is here tonight. Mark Blattner, Caron Rothstein are here. Rachel Rothstein is here. Our federation has supported this program. When we throw that out there, we said, hey, you want to support this? They have been behind the idea of us learning together, and it's remarkable that they are there stepping with us into this world. Duncan, you are my partner in life. I didn't make you edit this one. You're welcome. There's much more out there. You are my partner at home, my partner with our children. You work late nights to make sure that I am supported and with it and ready to go. You make sure that I am the best rabbi that I can be, and then some, and I am so grateful to you. And you'll tell Matan and Shiri when you go home that I thank them too. All right, they're pretty awesome too. They let me sleep occasionally, but they always inspire my writing, and I'm sure I wouldn't have as much material as I do if they weren't a part of my life. And I hope they'll be good travelers as we hopefully present this book around the country. This book is called Pirkei Imahot, The Wisdom of Mothers. To my very own wise woman. Don't cry, you'll make me cry. My mom, Cindy, thank you. You are my #1 fan and my supporter amongst everything that I do. Even if you don't always like me, you always love me. Thank you for your gentle guidance and wisdom along the way, and for being my champion even when I don't always believe in myself. To all of you, you all came tonight. It's pretty amazing. You bake cookies, some of you. You showed up. You buy books on Amazon. You leave reviews. I'll say it again. You are here. You are our supporters. It's amazing to look out into the room and to see so many amazing faces who are here to support the work that Lois and I have done, to support the work that we do for our community. A little bit shy. I want to remember this because I said, I don't remember feeling like this except for my wedding day. It's amazing to feel the love and support of this community. So this is the difference between our ages. I'm going to take a selfie with everybody here tonight because I need it. So everybody smile. We're taking a selfie. Thank you very much.
Picture it. Portland, Oregon, summer 1960, 2 weeks before our wedding. I'm standing in the guest room of the home in which I was raised with my mother, looking at all the fancy, beautiful gifts on display. In those days, you got fancy gifts and they were on display. After making various comments, she turned to me and said, I want to ask you a question. If the Queen of England came, would you use your finest things? And I said, what a silly question, of course I would. And she replied, honey, she's not coming. Don't wait for the Queen of England. Use your finest things for your family. You will never have more important company. I've lived by her wisdom ever since. The wisdom of mothers. My mother, like many of yours, was a wise woman. Humor me a moment. Raise your hand if your mother used certain expressions over and over when you were growing up. You know the ones I mean. Okay. Now raise your hand if on occasion you find yourself using one of those expressions yourself, or using it as a guideline to live your life. And for the women in the room, raise your hand if you have ever had the thought, oh my God, I'm turning into my mother. I rest my case. We Jews are storytellers. It's who we are and what we do. We use our collective memories to transmit our values and our heritage, and we do it over and over again. And that's what Rabbi Posen and I have done in our book. We've told, or more accurately retold, the story of Pirkei Imahot through contemporary feminine eyes. And we've invited Jewish women from different geographies, ages, and experiences to use their voices, to tell their stories, to share their words of wisdom through their contributions to Pirkei Imahot. We've also included some quotes from well-known Jewish women whose names you will recognize. It is all these stories, old and new, and the people who wrote them that we celebrate tonight. And they're nothing short of amazing. Some are humorous, like the one from the writer Cynthia Ozick, who said, in saying what is obvious, never use cunning. Yelling works better. Some are poignant. Some teach a lesson. Some are words to live by. Some just tell a story. And whether or not the topic of their message is something Jewish, a common Jewish thread is found throughout. I've chosen a very few stories to share with you tonight, but since there are more than 100 in the book, you'll have to buy the book to find out the rest. The first comment was submitted by Marnie Fogelson, a writer who says, every night before I go to sleep, I silently say, thank you for the blessing of a day. I know that each day, even if it's filled with tribulations, is a gift and an opportunity to be the mother and human I want to be. I chose this particular writing to begin tonight because of the importance gratitude has in my own life personally, and because I wanted to take a moment to publicly thank and express gratitude to two people on behalf of Rabbi Posen and myself. First, our thanks to Ruth Messinger, not only for the magnificent and generous foreword to our book, but for taking the time and effort to come here tonight as our guest speaker to give us this wonderful send-off. I wasn't going to tell this story, but I can't resist it. When I first read Ruth's foreword, I literally cried. I really, really cried. And I called my son, some of you know my son Joel, and I called my son, all my children, and I said, it's just magnificent. It was so wonderful, I cried. And he said, Mom, you cry at Safeway openings. It's not... But he is since read it and he thought it was wonderful too.
I cry at Safeway openings.
Second, our thanks to our editor par excellence, Jennifer McGrath. There are not enough words to thank Jennifer for the amazing job she did as editor. With competence, attention to detail, and lots of hard work, she literally brought our words and those of the storytellers to life. Thank you, Jennifer. I want to also acknowledge our children who are here tonight. Joel and Debbie, Diana, Jordan, and our surprise guest, 4-month-old, great-grandson Caden, who arrived Saturday night with his parents, and we came to the dinner table and there he sat. I also want to acknowledge family and friends who are here tonight who came from near and far. And I want to acknowledge every one of you. Your presence means a great deal to us. But most of all, I want to acknowledge Rabbi Eve Posen, my co-author, my teacher, my friend, for this amazing journey we have shared. It has been quite a ride. I actually laughed when I read these comments that were sent to us from Salem Pierce. This is what she wrote. When I was trying to decide whether or not to go to rabbinical school, I spoke with my grandmother regarding my concerns about the length of the program. Granny Gay, I said, if I go back to school, I'll be almost 40 by the time I'm a rabbi. She smiled at me and said, you're going to be 40 whether you're a rabbi or not. You might as well be doing what you want to do. Miss Pierce concludes with, I'm currently in rabbinical school, doing what I want to do. The main reason we wrote Pirkei Imahot was to acknowledge the voices of women. Lynn Magid Lazar expressed it very well when she wrote, there are issues others may not address if we as women do not tackle them. There are concerns that may never be focused on if we as women do not undertake them. There are moments and relationships that will be lost in a blur of activity if we as women do not value them. She concludes with, our collective power is unstoppable. And finally, Rabbi Marla Feldman, Executive Director of the Women of Reform Judaism, said, know before whom you stand. I wonder what the world would be like if we really believed we stood before God at all times. How would we act if we knew our actions would always be seen? And knowing we are seen, what choices would we make? Rabbi Feldman asks us questions, and we ask them too. In our book, we ask questions. Each of our reflections from Pirkei Avot and each chapter from Pirkei Imahot are followed by questions for self-study and discussion. And following those questions are the blank pages to which Rabbi Stanford referred. They're blank. Take a pen when you sit down to write, and then write your answers and your own wisdom in the book. I like acronyms. When I learn, or teach, or speak, I often create an acronym to help me remember the salient points I want to remember, or to pass on to others. So for the purposes of understanding our book, Pirkei Imahot, I give you the following acronym. F-A-T-E, FATE. The F stands for foundation, the base for creating our own moral compass. The A stands for action, to fill the needs of Tikkun Olam, the repair of the world. The T stands for target, finding a specific area on which to focus our energies. And the E is for engagement, reminding us to engage our voice. Foundation, action, target, engagement. I want to conclude my remarks tonight with a powerful passage from our book, contributed from Portland life coach and therapist, Laura Kosak. Laura writes about God's conversation with Cain before he chooses to murder his brother Abel. And then she says, Cain is not commanded to avoid wrong. Rather, he is invited to choose right. If sin, as we understand it in Judaism, is missing the mark like an archer, then God is holding open the space between potential and action. Choice. The options live within us. Our greatness lies in our choice. Pause. Plant your feet on the ground. Take aim towards your greatest self and release. Thank you.
Introductions are interesting. If any of you really need to know who Eve Posen and Lois Shenker were and who Ruth Messinger is, whom I'm about to introduce, then you folks are in the wrong room. But nevertheless, with my assurance that, as Henry VIII said to each of his 5 wives, I won't keep you long. It's my pleasure to tell you about Ruth Messinger. Ruth was born and raised in New York. She graduated from Radcliffe College before Harvard deigned to be coeducational, and received a Master of Social Work from the University of Oklahoma. She was on the New York City Council from 1978 to 1989, and from 1990 to 1998, she served as the Manhattan Borough President, an office she gave up unsuccessfully to run for mayor in the 1997 election against the then incumbent, Rudy Giuliani. That election, misguided as the result may have been, proved to be a boon to the Jewish world, because she immediately joined as the chief executive, the president of the American Jewish World Service, and we are all the beneficiaries of the work of the AJWS and of the leadership that she brought to it. Ruth personally distinguished herself by her leadership to the extent that she was in the Forward 50, the list of the most influential American Jews, for decade after decade. And she was named by the Jerusalem Post as one of the top 6 Jewish women in the world. And she was named as one of the 10 most inspiring women religious leaders by the Huffington Post. This is no ordinary person who has come to us tonight. We know that the prophetic voice, according to Albert Einstein, was an almost fanatical love of justice. Ruth represents that almost fanatical love of justice, for which I had the privilege of presenting to her the Albert D. Chernin Award, the highest honor given by the now Jewish Council for Public Affairs. Chernin Award was named after the longtime executive of the JCPA and its predecessor organization, and it turns out that Ruth and Al Chernin were members of the same synagogue in the Upper West Side of New York. Al said that their membership in that synagogue was mostly characterized by their absence from that synagogue. Ruth may not agree with that, but if Al had been alive at the time that the award was presented to Ruth, I know how pleased he would have been and how pleased we were to provide that for her. Allowing fate to absolve you from creating the future is no role for one committed to applied hope. That's the message that Ruth has given to us through the AJWS and her personal leadership of Jewish causes. This year, when our family gathered together for Pesach, we joined with the AJWS selection for the Haggadah by adding these lines: freedom from bigotry and oppression, equality for minorities shunned by prejudice and hatred, respect for the aspirations and humanity of women and girls, acceptance for people persecuted for who they are or whom they love, sustenance for communities living in hunger, peace in societies torn by war, a safe harbor for refugees and survivors of violence, and the promise of dignity and human rights for all. Ruth, it's your touchstone that gave us that language and that message, and appropriately so, because you are the touchstone, in my view. You are the gold standard for tikkun olam and human rights. Tonight, Ruth will be speaking on the topic, there's something about the women. Following her address, she'll be willing to take your questions. Ruth.
Thank you. Wow. This is quite a cast of speakers to follow. Thank you. I particularly want to say how pleased I am to be here with you, Rabbi Shenker, and you'll see in my remarks a connection to your remarks, but it's just a privilege to be here. And it's my honor, frankly, to be with some very old friends and some new friends, but with all of you, first of all, to honor Lois Shenker on her 80th birthday. And to participate in the launch of this amazing book. Arden, thank you for that introduction, but he didn't say that we met and bonded first over the work against the genocide in Darfur, which I'm sure he involved several of you in, but he was a stalwart voice, as were many other people, I'm happy to say, around the country, in something that really brought the Jewish community together in a very powerful way to recognize our own past, understand that evil still exists in the world, and take action against it. And so I thank you for that work, and I thank you for the fact that in the time that we worked together and saw each other at conferences, and you gave me an award, I got to know Lois, which is what brings me here tonight. What I'm going to do is say a few things about the book, a few things about myself so that you will understand my sense about the power of women, and then to bring to you different women's voices, that is, voices of women different than the ones that are so alive in Pirkei Imahot, but that for me speak to the fact that all over the world it is very often the women who are stepping forward, who are taking risks, and who are making change. And I think it is the best possible tribute to Lois and to Rabbi Eve for them to hear voices of other women that didn't fit in this particular volume, but that are loud and strong in the world. So my thoughts about their book are in the foreword of the book, but that's not going to stop me from sharing a few of them with you on this occasion. This book elevates the voices and the wisdom of women. It brings us, as you've heard from various of the speakers, their very different perspectives on the world. And in the process, it gives us a new compendium of words to live by. Many of us have loved parts of Pirkei Avot, then run into some of the quotes that Rabbi Eve shared and thought, what on earth? But meanwhile, we could use new words and words from different places, different people, with different perspectives on the world. So what Pirkei Imahot does, and obviously you've all already started memorizing it page by page, is it builds off this original great Jewish collection of ideas and instructions for how to live our lives. It takes those nuggets of advice that are, in many instances, powerful parts of our history. The good news about all of our ancestors is that they not only wrote down what they thought, they wrote down all of their disagreements with each other. So it gives us some opportunity to winnow through those observations and think about, what does this really say to me? But more importantly, as Eve and Lois recognized, we as women see many of these things differently, and they provide women an opportunity to say so. Sometimes they take well-known teachings and give them a new slant. Even more importantly, they provide a forum for new voices. As you've heard from each of the authors of this book correctly, we each have our own teachers and mentors, and many of those are women. And many of those are women who, for various reasons, gave us words that we value, although they have not always been written down, and they've only very rarely been brought together. Now, I'm going to say a few things about my mother in a few minutes, but I want to say, Rabbi Eve, that, this invitation to remember what your ancestors said can lead you to some very funny thoughts. So when you started tonight, like with what do you remember that your mother or your grandmother said, I have to be honest with all of you, this certainly is not in my prepared remarks, and say that my grandmother used to say all the time, wear clean underwear because you might be in an accident. So that obviously rings a bell with many of you, but that's what you made me remember. Was not exactly for my mood of tonight, but that's what popped into my head. More importantly, Lois and Eve recognized how often in our history, and I'm going to say particularly in our Jewish history, women have been marginalized, shunned aside, and denied their public voice. These two authors, in their study sessions that produced a book, have brought those marginalized women and their teachings quite literally from the margins to the center of the page. And then most significantly, and Rabbi Stamfer and I are in agreement here, they have invited us in, not just figuratively, but literally, onto the center of our own pages. So when you leaf through the book and you see those blank pages, understand that what these authors intend is to remind us that we are wise ourselves. And they give us not only permission, but actual space, white space on blank pages to share our wisdom and to write ourselves further into the histories of our families, our communities, and the world. So this is essentially a book of wisdom for readers and a book of wisdom of readers. It is a true living text. It is our very own Torah. It's an honor to be part of that effort, to have been able to write the foreword and to be here for the launch of that book. And Jen Knutson, who interviewed me this afternoon, said, okay, but if you didn't know Lois well and you weren't enamored of her, why would you want to do something about Pirkei Imahot? And I realized that the answer is because so much of my own life is the story of women. Women too often unsung, but women of vision, women as leaders, women who pushed the envelope, who found ways to make themselves visible, and who helped make a difference for themselves, their families, their communities, and the world. And I want to speak about and to the honor of some of those women. The line, by the way, Arden, there's something about the women, just so everybody has the credential, which it turns out you couldn't put in the book because there were copyright laws. But I recommend to you a wonderful folk singer named Holly Neer, who wrote a song called There's Something About the Women in My Life. So I want to say a word now, which might seem strange, about my own history. But my mother, who was the signal and most important influence in my life, the woman who helped me to build my Jewish feminist consciousness, which is what has informed all of my activism and my current commitment to global justice. My mother worked at the Jewish Theological Seminary for 55 years. And we will now test the age of the people in the audience by put up your hands if you remember being told to come home in time to first listen, radio, and then later to watch on television, The Eternal Light. Okay, see, there's still some of you still alive. So my mother was, for most of those, for 30 or 40 of those years, the co-producer of The Eternal Light, which is the single most, without any question, the single most important book about, radio and television program about a particular faith done on a national channel. It was NBC. I have no idea why NBC chose to do it, but they carried it for years, and it really told Jews and non-Jews the story of Judaism, of Jewish leaders, of Jewish figures at the arts, of Jewish holidays. It was an amazing compendium of information. Then I went, as you heard, very briefly, into the world of politics. Just a note to say that it was a great experience. I loved it. There are very many things that I'm very proud of that I was able to do when I was in government in New York City. But I cannot begin to tell you, and you're very glad, you should be very happy that we don't have the time for me to tell you the unbelievable encounters with sexism and misogyny in the world of politics, in which women are constantly belittled by men who intend to belittle us and men who don't even have a clue what they're doing or saying. This is a problem that is still much too much with us, and if we had more time, I would give you a quiz, but we don't have the time, so I'll just give you the answers. The first question would be, you can think about it yourself for 1 second. What percentage of elected positions in the United States are currently held by women? The answer is 24.8%. Where do we rank in the world among 190 countries in the percentage of women holding elected office? We rank 104th. And a question that none of you will know the answer to unless you've heard me speak before, and that is, which country has the highest percentage and the only percentage over 50% of women in elected office? You won't guess. And the answer is Rwanda. So, lots of challenges, lots of ways and areas to make change. I'm happy to discuss this with any of you in detail later. I want to take the rest of my time to talk about American Jewish World Service. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about who we are. We are the leading Jewish organization motivated by Jewish values that works to recognize and expand human rights and to end poverty in the developing world. We do this by collaborating with on-the-ground grassroots organizations and social change efforts that are led by the people themselves, that are led by poor people fighting for their rights, that are led by farmers trying to hold on to their land, that are led by women and girls trying to change the age at which girls are pushed into marriage. And our fundamental idea here, which is what carries me from the book to AJWS and back, is the idea that women should be the speakers, the shapers, and the leaders of their own futures, wherever they are in the world. So I'm going to try to tell you very briefly a little bit about some extraordinary women who are very much a part of the world that in their own way, the authors of Pirkei Imahot are trying to build. I'm going to first make a couple of comments about the state of the world, and you have to promise not to get depressed. Women have far fewer freedoms than men. They are often prohibited from making decisions about their own bodies and lives. They experience not only discrimination, but violence. They may well be, and in most of the parts of the world, they actually are the farmers of the land, but they don't own it. And they tend the house and raise the children, but they have no voice in whom they marry. 1 billion people in the world, just about, are defined as the extreme poor. 80% of those are women. Every year, there are more than 50,000 women and girls who die, more than 500,000 women and girls who die from complications of pregnancy and childbirth because they have no prenatal care. In the next decade, more than 100 million girls will be married against their will before they turn 18. 100 million, probably more, probably about 15 million a year. And most tragically, and connected to the issue of child marriage, of the 80 million children around the world who are not in school, 65% of them are girls. The reason you are not to get depressed is because we cannot despair, because those women do not despair. In country after country and community after community, it is most often women who take matters into their own hands, who become their community's most valued agents of change, who are the catalysts for collective action. They are the people who are organizing, who are speaking up and speaking out, who are fighting back. At American Jewish World Service, we consider it a privilege to partner with these activists on the ground, the vast majority of whom are women, 500 different organizations in 19 different countries, where people are changing lives of themselves and their communities, and in some cases of the world. So, a couple of stories and quotes. The most famous, I guess, of our partners is a woman named Lema Bowie, who is the woman who organized Muslim and Christian women in Liberia to work together to end what was a 14-year civil war. This is a bit dramatic, but it's true that she did it by organizing a sex strike. Those of you who remember Lysistrata, she told women, just tell the guy you won't sleep with him until the civil war is settled. And then in case nobody believed her, she organized a group of women to go to Ghana, where the peace agreement was being negotiated in some fancy legislative building, parliament building, and they made a circle around the entire building and said that the men couldn't leave until they signed the peace treaty. And it worked. And she is a partner of ours, and unlike many of our partners who are very unsung, Lema Bowie won the Nobel Peace Prize 6 years ago. Sonali Khatun is a young woman in India, very briefly, married off by her family at the age of 14. She came home one day, there were chairs set up inside their little mud hut. She asked her mother what the chairs were for, and her mother said, "Your husband's family is coming to visit." In her case, which is not common, she was subject to so much abuse by her husband that her family allowed her to get a divorce. And she ended up going to work with a grassroots organization that we had been supporting, and she now is in a position where she trains young women about their rights. And in her own voice, Sonali said, "I used to be afraid, but slowly I gained confidence. Now I don't have any doubt. I can do anything and work anywhere. I want to study more and do work that matters for society." And then we have Binta Diaw. Binta Diaw is in Senegal in an organization, long story which you're not going to hear, about the fight to end the practice of female genital cutting, which has been quite successful in Senegal, and they have started to teach people in other countries how to teach women to argue for their own human rights and how to change this practice because it is in fact a violation of their human rights as well as an assault on their bodies. And Binta wrote, "I learned that I did not have to be cut, to be taken out of school or forced to marry a man chosen by my parents. Learning about human rights changed my entire life. Since then, I have been promoting all girls and women to know their human rights in my region and everywhere. Through my radio broadcast, I have reached thousands of rural girls and women who suffered the way I did, and they now have been able to change and abandon those practices." And then I want to tell you in a little bit more detail about two women working together in Burma, a country that is now called Myanmar by its leaders, but is still called Burma by most of its indigenous groups. The two women are named Ja Kwan and Lu Ra. The story is a story that exists all over the world, and that is that smallholder indigenous farmers are having their land taken away from them by multinational corporations for the purpose of excavating for oil, mining minerals, doing industrial agriculture, or in the worst of all situations, damming up rivers that flood out thousands of hectares of land, driving the people who have lived there for generations and whose only way of surviving was subsistence farming off of the land. So in Burma, there has been a huge effort to proceed with a hydropower dam being built by the Chinese. And in the process, villages were visited and told, "You have to leave or you're going to be flooded out." The electricity, by the way, that would be produced would go directly to China. None of it would go to Burma, and certainly none of it would go to the people whose lives are being destroyed by the dams themselves. So these are two women who resisted. They said, "This is exploitative work. It's discriminatory specifically against the ethnic minorities in Burma. We make our living on this land. We value, and in some cases, we essentially organize our religious practices around this land, and we don't want to move. And the outside interests came in with every form of land grabbing you can imagine. So you don't need to hear all the descriptions, but every policy promising things, promises that weren't kept, and eventually they moved the school so that the women who cared the most about their children's education finally felt that they had to move. Jaquan was a woman who had separated from her husband, again for the same reason that Sonali did, because of emotional and physical abuse. She was taking care of 5 children. She heard that the dam was going to be built and that it would be impossible to stay in our village. So she began to talk. She connected with women's groups in the local town. She became the leader of a group through her own church and started mobilizing against the dam. As she said then, they made life impossible by destroying the school. So we felt we had to move. But the final straw that broke the camel's back was a bomb that was set off near her home, which was clearly set off by the people who were trying to get her to move, but which they then said that she had set off. So they began investigation of her, and she says, many leaders were investigated and interrogated. Most ran away from the village. I was questioned all night. I was very afraid. The government and the organization building the dam then cut off the food and the money to all of the activists, but she nevertheless, through a grassroots group that we fund and support, organized to protect the human rights of local people and to safeguard their natural resources. She found this other woman named Lu Ra. They had a meeting of nearly 50 women who had been negatively affected by the dam project. The women activists came from surrounding villages, some traveling many miles by foot. They shared new information so that they could all learn from each other and bring this knowledge back to their communities. Jaquan and Lu Ra emphasized the role that women must play in uniting and fighting for their rights together. Jaquan said, it is so important that we work for women's rights. I want other women leaders to work on these kinds of issues. We have to build a strong community. And Lu Ra told the women, women should be leaders, and that's why we need to come together to gain knowledge from each other. These are the voices of women that we don't hear. It will be a long time before these voices get written down in books as beautiful as Pirkei Imahot. But it is the same principle. The women said, this is Lu Ra now, if there were no local organization, the government would do whatever it wants. They might have already built the dam. They believed because our community was not educated, they could do what they wished. But because of our organizing efforts, people are becoming educated and not letting that happen. In the past, villagers were afraid, but now they're much more aware of their rights. And then she said, if we are together, we have strength. We have to work to reject building the dams. Our life depends on the river. And I hope that that's a visual message that you can all take. Our life depends on our being in touch with the things that are the most important to us, the things that nurture us spiritually, the things that inform us politically, the things that commit us to work in powerful and strong ways for social change. Pirkei Imahot has some of those stories. There are Jewish women in our contemporary American history who have been saying these things in many ways for quite some time. I'll share 2 of them with you. Lillian Wald wrote, we must add our voices to those who cry out that there is a standard below which we will not allow human beings to live. All are responsible. And one of my favorites, because it informs the notion, as does Pirkei Imahot, that there's much more work to do, and it picks up directly on Lois's acronym. Grace Paley said, the only recognizable feature of hope is action. So the women that I've tried to bring into this room tonight from far away all of these women worked. They worked then, and some of them are working now, to change the world, to recognize fundamental rights, and to secure freedom for everyone. That is the tradition of which Pirkei Imahot and its authors are a part, and it is a privilege to be here to congratulate them. Thank you.